Hello everybody. This is going to be an interesting type of video I don't think I've ever made before. I got this idea from MichaelAdamsRocks. If you don't know who that is, check him out on YouTube. He's pretty cool. Definitely a good channel that I would recommend. I am going to be ranking all 6 cars that I have owned since I started driving. I've owned 6. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit differently than he did in that he did not include vehicles that he currently owned. However, if we do that, I'm only going to have 4, and so that's going to be more boring than 6. So we're just going to include all of them, including the ones I own now. So I'm going to start at the bottom with the one that I least would want to own again and go up to the top for my favorite one. Now, I should preface this by saying I've never owned a car in my life that I've truly hated, so really I think I would take any of these back, again, honestly. Even though some of them I didn't like as much. So we've got the 1995 Chevy Monte Carlo LS. We have the 2010 Ford Explorer Eddie Bauer V8. We have the 2000 Saturn SL1. We have the 2007 Ford F-150 XLT. We have the 2004 Ford Freestar Limited. And we have the 2009 Ford Fusion SE. So let's get into this. All right. Starting at the bottom, number 6, for the car that I would least want to own again. Again, I didn't hate any of these cars, but if out of all the cars I've owned, if there was one that I would least want to have back, I really hate to say this, but this would be it. And that would be the 1995 Chevy Monte Carlo LS. Yes, I still have the original window sticker, as well as a bunch of other stuff from that car. So it's basically sacrilege to say that the first of anything is the worst, and that was my first car. But man, out of all the cars I've owned, I didn't really care for that one. I liked it at the time, and it got me through a year and a half. It got me through most of high school. But out of the cars I've owned, man, I was not sad at all to see that one go. Even though it was my first car, I bought it when I was 15. I took my driving test in it. I spent a lot of time with friends in it. It's at the bottom. Very easy decision. That car, when I bought it, was low mileage. It had no rust. It was an Arizona car. It was a real nice red color. You guys remember it. Beautiful car. Good condition. Had leather seats. Had the bucket seats with the console shifter. That was an option. Had the black interior. Had the 3100 V6, which was not fast. The car went 0 to 60 in about 11 seconds, especially being front-wheel drive with the wonderful 4T65 transmission that we all know and love, that was already slipping at 90,000 miles. But that car, it wasn't fast, but what I did like about it being a V6 was that if you were in traffic and you just gave it a little gas, it would go. It would get out of its way. It's not like a 4-cylinder where it has to rev and it just can't even get out of its own way. Now, it was decent. It had, I think, 160 horsepower, which is nothing for a V6 these days, but kind of a boat anchor engine. It was reliable. It was probably the best thing about that car is that it was a reliable engine. Had some issues with the intake manifold gaskets leaking, but it never gave me any issues. Never leaked any oil or coolant or anything. The main issue with that car was that it was kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It was a big car, but the interior felt very small. It was a coupe, and the doors were giant, but admittedly the backseat was pretty big for having such a small feeling interior. That car got okay gas miles, about 20 in town, about 26 on the highway, so not great, but not horrible. Decent power, nothing crazy. Air conditioning on it, it had a leak, it didn't work. It was decently reliable, but nothing crazy. It had a pretty big trunk, I'll give it that, full-size car. It had a pretty good-sized trunk. I definitely liked that. You could fold the back seats down. That came in handy a couple times. I actually got a lawnmower in there one time. This is why I shouldn't be allowed to go looking for stuff on the side of the road. I did, in fact, get a goddamn push mower into the back of that car with the trunk closed, with the seats folded down. Tough fit, but I did it. Another thing about it that was probably one of the worst things, honestly, about it, that car had a horrible driving position. And what I mean was that the hood was very high, the seats were very low, the blind spots in that car were unreal. I mean, good luck turning around and looking behind you. It had a rear windshield, and that was about it. You could not see to the side, you could not see out the back windows. No matter how you positioned the seat, the steering wheel, it was impossible to see over the hood of that car. And no matter where you put the seat, up, down, whatever, I'm 5'8", I'm not short, and it was terrible.
The dashboard was real high up. It just was not a good driving position. And that car had a super low roof, so if you had the seat position up really at any height, your head would hit the headliner getting in and out of the car. It was just a terrible driving position in that car. Also, if you think that you can use your mirrors to avoid the blind spots, yeah, good luck. That car, because it was an upgraded LS, had like the sport mirrors, which were absolutely tiny. I mean, the mirrors on that car, I am not exaggerating, were probably 5 inches long and maybe 3 inches tall. I am not kidding. That was about what they were. Maybe 5 by 5 to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe. They were awful. And then the rear view mirror was giant, but no matter how you positioned it, you could only see out of half of the back windshield. Now, it's a car, it's not an SUV, you're not supposed to see the whole back windshield, but no matter where you positioned the mirror, half of the back windshield would always be out of view. There was no way to... It was a massive unit, but it was so, like, zoomed in. I don't know how they managed to do that. Leave it to GM.
The interior on that car was kind of crappy. The seats were all rock-hard leather. I mean, the dashboard was sticky. The steering wheel wasn't peeling yet, but everything on that car was cheap 90s GM plastic. It was bad. Headliner wasn't drooping, surprisingly, probably because it was garage-kept most of its life. Didn't have any of the newer systems like TPMS or stupid crap like that, so never had any lights on the dashboard. That was nice. The car... I don't know if the floater in the fuel tank was mechanical, but every time you would turn left in that car, the fuel gauge would go down like a quarter of the way and then slowly come back up. Whoever designed that car's engine bay should be shot. I'm sorry, but GM in the 90s, I don't know what they were doing. If you wanted to jumpstart that car, you had to undo a support bar and move the washer tank out of the way, so you better hope that you have a 13mm ratchet on you, because if not, you're not jumpstarting it. That is General Motors. That car is the reason I'm not a GM guy, honestly, but it wasn't a bad car. I had it for a year and a half, and it never gave me trouble. It never didn't start on me. In fact, the only time it did was towards the end of my ownership with it when I had already gotten a different car. The battery started going dead, and I had an issue with something draining it. Not sure what it was. I sold it that way. But the car was just... It just was a car. That's the best way to put it. It got me where I needed to go. When I had my license, it was cool. I had one of the oldest cars in my high school, which is not a great thing. In hindsight, I wish I had bought a newer car. I don't know what my method at the time for buying such an old car was. It was pretty. It was a nice red color. I liked that. But it just wasn't good. I hate to say it. Real good condition car, though. It was taken care of. Fun story with that one. Along with having my first car, I also had my first car accident. And this is not including like you scrape a curb or you're 2 miles an hour and you back into a building or you hit a little dick for something like that. No, this is my first accident that involved another car, and this I don't think I've ever actually talked about. This was in October of 2022, so I'd owned the car for well over a year at this point. Towards the end of my ownership with it, I was driving down the road that gets not out of my neighborhood, but is near my neighborhood. It leads you onto the main, big 4-lane highway. And it's a divided highway, so you have to turn right when you get to the end of the road. So I was looking to my right, or my left rather, saying, oh, clear, whatever. And there was a Expedition in front of me who was at the stop sign waiting to go. Well, what had happened was he gave his car a little bit of gas, so he started to go, but he stopped. Not like a hard stop, but he gave it some gas so he could go like this and then stop again. Well, the problem is, I saw his brake lights go off, and I thought in my head, all right, he's gone. So I'm looking to my left. I start to give it some gas, and about 3 seconds later, I hear a boom, and I rear-ended him. I went into the back of his Expedition. I pulled over. I was very apologetic. I said, this is my fault 100%. You got to think the bumper difference was like this. I cracked my headlight, I cracked my bumper, and I had some paint missing on the hood. He had a quarter-sized little dimple in the bumper of his Expedition. I'm telling you. And he looked at it, he goes, nah, whatever, don't worry about it. Yeah, I got pretty lucky on that one, but definitely careful pulling onto that road again. And the sad part is I've almost had that happen before, and I've worried to go, and I've been like, nope, not having a repeat. So, the funny thing about that one, too, is that I used to have a dash cam, and I think I actually captured that on dash cam. So if I can find the dash cam footage somewhere, maybe I'll upload it. You're pretty much just going to hear me go, oh, shit. That's pretty much what it was.
Oh, shit. Oh, fuck.
But that car, it was okay. It wasn't great. I definitely did have some challenges with the 2 doors because when I was in high school, I wanted to carry people. And so, You know, it was a very consistent, oh, who's going to have to sit in the back, you know, this time, you know, fold the front seat forward, get in the back. I didn't care about that. I thought it looked cool. Friends were not impressed with it. Not at all. They were like, oh, you have this old car? And I'm like, yep, she's old. Sherry, that was her name. Did not impress the girls at my high school, I can tell you that much. I thought, oh, bright red car, yeah, this'll be good. No. No, it did not. I did not pick up any chicks in that car. I don't even think they looked at it, honestly. It didn't have tinted windows either, so you know who was driving it. It didn't help that, you know, I had a freaking custom license plate with my name on it, so that was, you know, added to the crap. Although that I got rid of part of the way through. I only had that for the first couple months I had the car. But back to the car itself, other than the interior being horribly built and it being a pain to work on, it wasn't awful. It just wasn't good. But I wasn't sad to see it go. I think I would still buy it back if I had the chance to, but out of all the cars I've owned, I don't have any desire to try to go get that one back. I don't have any desire to drive a Monte Carlo or a Lumina from that era either, honestly. They're not that good. I can still picture how that car sounded. I can picture how it drove. I can picture the doors, what they felt like, what they sounded like. I can picture the shifter, what it felt like when you shifted. I can hear the starter in my head. I can hear the engine note. 3100 has a very unique engine note. I can still picture the smell of that interior, very particular smell that those 90s GM cars had. Fun memories in that car, but at the same time, one of the worst periods of my life I went through owning that car. So when I think of that period of time in my life, that's the car I had. That's not what makes it on number 6 on the list, but it doesn't help. And I'm not going to talk about that. That's a whole nother video, but I went through some dark times and I had that car. And then pretty soon after I got out of the dark times is when I got a different car. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, unfortunately, although it was my first car and I did like it, the 95 Chevy Monte Carlo at number 6. All right, number 5. This one took me a minute. The Monte Carlo was pretty easy to say last, but this 3, 4, 5 range, I kind of had to struggle. And like I said, I've never hated a car I've owned. This car I actually particularly liked. It was the car itself is the reason why. But number 5 on the list would have to be the 2000 Saturn SL1. Yes, this is the original ignition key, and you can see in typical GM quality, it's completely golden. That is the original key. I still have it. Oh boy, this was the 3rd car I owned, and this was my first foray into the beater car segment. This little car, I love this little car, but oh my God, it was a bad car. I would say objectively, out of all the cars I've owned, this was the worst one. Hands down, 100%. I mean, the thing was a fun little shit box is what it was, and that's why it was hard for me to put it at number 5, but just being a car, it was terrible. Nothing on it worked. I bought it with way over 200,000 miles on it, and I drove it till it had, I think, 230-something, 220-something on it. Every single thing on that car was broken. There was not a single thing on that car I don't think that worked factory. I mean, just to name a couple, it was 3 different colors, so that was fun. When I bought it, the taillights were mismatched because it had been in an accident. Oh boy. The headliner was falling down when I bought it, so I ripped it out. The dome light was held in by the wires. You could not unlock or lock the passenger door from the inside because the lock bar had been taken out, which was my doing. The crank windows, no motors to break. Half the time you go to roll it down, you pull the crank off, leave it to GM. The car would randomly decide to start and rev way high, and you'd have to shut it down. It had an issue with the idling. Anytime you were going over a hill at any sort of speed, the transmission would try to downshift. It was slipping like crazy. The car took about a quart of oil a week towards the end. The thing ticked, it rattled, it squeaked. The engine just moaned and pissed along. Got horrible fuel mileage. That thing was probably burning up so much shit inside. It got like 18 miles per gallon out of a car that was supposed to get 30. That car had the single cam 1.9 liter 4-cylinder. It was the single jingle. Slow as piss, loud as piss, but it moved the car. And it was a hell of a lot better design than that Monte Carlo was, I can tell you that. That was a night and day difference working on that car. Had a little 12-gallon tank, though, so filling it up was $30. That was fun, but I only got about 250 miles out of a tank. The temperature gauge on the car never worked. It would never go above a quarter, which I don't think was right. Check engine light was always on. It was PO446, I think was the code. The car would lose coolant towards the end, like once a week. I'd have to put coolant in multiple times a week to keep it going. Someone had emptied it out of Dex Cool and put regular in, and they didn't try to flush it, so that worked well. It was not rusted out. It was a Washington State car. It had no rust. Probably the best thing about it. Man, the headlights were all freaking yellowed out. The thing was ragged out when I bought it. The freaking carpeting in the inside of the trunk didn't stay in. You couldn't open the trunk from the outside because the lock was broken. You'd have to jiggle the key and bend it. Man, what else? AC didn't work, shocker. The heater core on that car, I'm pretty sure, was bad because you had no heat in the winter. You would turn the vent on, which, by the way, that car had the weakest blower motor, I think, out of any car in this world. You had to put it on setting 4, and only then you would get sort of a noise, and you got about this much air coming out of it. It was bad. But you got cold air in the friggin' winter, hot air in the summer. I had to drive that car with gloves and a hat and a scarf on because there was no heat, which also meant there was no defroster. The car had manual cables to shift the zones, which you could hear in the dashboard, which I preferred. But what are you going to do if the air coming out of the vents is about 50 degrees, 60 degrees? In the winter, you can't defrost the windshield. So I would have to go out and scrape it and wipe away the windshield with a paper towel as I was driving because I couldn't clear it. The rear defroster didn't work. GM with their little soldered points on it fell off. The car was not terrible to drive. I loved having a car that small. I miss having a car that small. God, that thing was freaking amazing to drive. Really, it was horrible to drive, but I could go around a corner in that thing and there was nothing to it. Had to go pretty slow because you felt like you were going to flip over sometimes, even though it was so small. Things I liked about it, though, the interior on that car, I don't know who designed it, but they did a good job. That car did not feel like a real small car on the inside. My seating position, now granted, had cheap-ass seats. You could feel the bars. They were terrible, but no height adjustment, no lumbar, just backwards, forwards, and a back adjustment. The seats were decent for someone. I'm 5'8", and you could easily scoot them back further. My head had like this much room between the ceiling and the seat and the headliner. Seatbelts came right across perfectly. The steering wheel was very easy to just hold on to. The stocks were right here when you needed them. Everything you could reach was like this in the car. Shifter was very easy to shift. Radio was very easy. Whoever designed it, the back seat, oh my God, the back seat in that car, if you didn't know any better, you'd think you're in a Taurus. That back seat was freaking huge. And I don't know how they did it, probably because there was no trunk room, but I put 3 people back there once and they didn't complain. It was actually fine. Even if you put the front seats all the way back, you still had about that much room for your legs. So it was not terrible, honestly. It was a shit box, but they did some good things in Spring Hill. I can tell you. They did. The radio was not one of them. The radio on that car didn't work right. It was shorted out. You would go to turn the volume knob and it would go loud, quiet, loud, quiet, loud, quiet. Car had 4 speakers. The 2 back deck lid ones were original and they worked. The front passenger one was blown when I bought the car. I replaced it and it shorted. The front driver one was shorted when I bought the car. Never fixed. But, yeah, that car, I miss that little car. I don't miss it. My dad, when I got rid of it, was happy because, I mean, he basically said, you should sell it now while it's still running. And I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Sold it for less than $1,000. That was easy. Easiest car sale I've ever done. But yeah, I really don't like to put that as number 5 because it wasn't that bad of a car, but it was. It really was. I liked it, but I mean, my mom wouldn't even ride in it. She's like, I'm not riding that piece of shit. And I was like, okay. That was a fun little fucking car. My friends, they fucking, when I went to my tech school, I had it my senior year there, they fucking laughed at it. They were like, oh yeah, that, and I'm like, yep, that's it. That's Gladys. That was what I called it. It was Gladys. But man, that thing was a trip. And that car was just more fun because it's like, oh, what's going to break on it today? And it was my daily driver, but I still had my pickup truck at the time, which I still have. So I didn't have to worry about it breaking, but that's the thing. It didn't break down. Never once did that car strand me. It was a piece of shit, but it never stranded me. It had no suspension whatsoever, but it didn't strand me. If you were going 70 miles an hour, it would be going 3,000 RPM because there was no overdrive, but it didn't strand me. That was a fun little car. I actually do miss that car. I do. I miss having a car that shitty, honestly. There was some charm in that car having no heat. There really was, and it sounds awful, but yeah, so. That would be the number 5 spot, would be the 2000 Saturn SL1. All right, number 4 on the list for the one that I would least want to own again. And this one might surprise some of you. That would be the 2007 Ford F-150. And yes, this is my actual car key. So I'm sure this one's going to come as a surprise. Like, you own that truck. Don't you love that truck? Yeah, I do. Here's why it's number 4, though. That truck has nothing special about it, is the best way I can put it. It is a pickup truck with no features, not a lot of creature comforts. It hauls stuff. It does its job. It's been 95 to 99%. I mean, engine-wise, 4.6 liter V8, it's unstoppable. But yeah, it's just boring. But the thing about the truck is that there's just nothing to it, really. It is a go-to-work vehicle. It gets crap gas mileage. It goes, it picks stuff up, it takes me where I need to go, it delivers stuff to people, and it's there when I don't want to drive my Fusion. I've had it now, I think, through 3 other vehicles, and it's been a great truck, but the reason it's so far down is because there's nothing special about it. I mean, really, there's nothing in it that's made me go, wow, and there's nothing in it that's made me go, ugh. So, I guess if there's one reason why it's number 4, I've had a couple of small issues with it, but nothing major. The suicide doors, they both broke. That's a common thing. Recently, the ABS module failed. It's still broken. I haven't bothered to fix it, which is why those lights are on the dashboard. But it's a Georgia truck, so no rust. That's fun. Easy to work on mostly. Had a couple issues. One of the dome lights doesn't work. There's an issue with the circuit board. Little stuff like that. But it's been good. It's a good little truck. It's a good little runaround truck. I just can't put it any higher because there's nothing special about it, really. There's nothing about it that, if I ever get rid of that pickup truck, which I'll let you in on a little secret, my plan is to keep that pickup truck for as long as humanly possible. Even if I'm not driving it, even if it's just sitting, I want to keep it. Yeah, I want that to be my sitting in the garage vehicle with the frame rusted out, if that makes sense. That's my one-day vehicle. That's what I want it to be. Because I'm sure, I'll have a newer pickup truck at some point, but that one I think is going to be with me for a while. It's got 170,000 miles on it, nothing for a 4.6. But yeah, it's just a good little all-around truck. I really don't have anything to say about it, and that's why it's so low. It's pretty nice being an extended cab. Got a full back seat. I've carried people. It's got cold air, nice radio, nice tunes. Pretty basic everything else because it's a pickup truck, but it's been a good little truck. That's really why it's so far down. I just don't have anything to say about it. All right, now we're getting into the top 3. The number 3 car that I would least want to have, or most want to have back, actually. This one might also surprise some of you, because once I say this, you're probably going to know what you're going to know what number 1 and 2 are, but you're going to probably be surprised when I tell you which one is number 1 and which one is number 2. But number 3 would, in fact, be the 2009 Ford Fusion SE. And yes, again, my actual keychain. So the reason that this car, and I haven't had it very long, it's my daily driver, the reason that it's above the F-150, but why it's still not number 2, number 1, again, like the F-150, there's nothing to say about it. It is a 4-cylinder Ford Fusion. It is not a special car, it's not a fun car, it's not a fast car, in fact, it's slow as piss. It gets good gas mileage, it takes me to work, it takes me home, it takes me on trips, it's reliable, it's easy to work on, well, somewhat. Ford Mexico plants at that time, I mean, let's put it this way. You can tell it was built in Mexico, and I'm going to leave it at that. But it's just a car. It is a car, nothing special, nothing crazy. But the reason I put it above the F-150 is because I thought about it, if I had to drive one of them for a week and not touch the other one because I own them so I can do this comparison, it would be the Fusion, no question. I like the F-150, but it's a pickup truck. I don't find the idea of daily driving a pickup truck appealing. I just don't. It's uncomfortable. It gets bad gas mileage. That Fusion does everything I need it to do. I've hauled stuff in that Fusion. You can put the seats down. You can put stuff in it. I don't get why people are allergic to sedans in America. You can put stuff in that Fusion. I've done it. I've put pieces of wood in the Fusion. You just fold the seats down. It's easy. Still gets 30 miles per gallon on the highway, maybe even a little more. But that's the reason why it's so low. It's just not anything crazy. I mean, high, but at the same time, compared to my Saturn or my Monte Carlo, better car 100-fold. I mean, no comparison. If it was a V6, maybe I'd put it a little up higher on the list, but I really was looking for a 4-cylinder, so that I can't fault that. But it's been a good car. I really like it. There's nothing special about it, nothing crazy, but it does what I need it to do, and it does it pretty well. So that's the reason why that one is number 3. Never had any complaints with it, but never had any. What I can tell you about it is I don't know how long have I owned that car? Whatever. It's a good car. Nothing else happened. That's pretty much the story of that car. Nothing to say. It's a Ford Fusion. I mean, what else can you say? Everyone that's ridden in it has said it's nice. Back seat's pretty comfortable. Back seat is bigger than an Impala of the time, which I found out weirdly. But yeah, that's all it is. It's a Ford Fusion. All right, now we're getting into the top 2 and the top 1, and I think you guys already know what they are because you know what I haven't said, and I think it's probably surprised. One of them has probably surprised you. One of them probably hasn't. But number 2 car that let's put it this way. If I had to pick 1 or 2 to get back, this would be a very hard choice, but I think I would pick number 1 as it is for a reason I'm going to talk about. But number 2 car that I would most want to have back would be, the number 2 car, of course, would be the 2010 Ford Explorer Eddie Bauer. Now, I think when I said that, people are shocked because now you know number 1 is the Freestar, and I think everyone's going to say, what? This Explorer was my number 1 for a long time before I had the Freestar, but let me explain. That Explorer, amazing car. It was a 2010, last year of the body-on-frame, real Explorers, Eddie Bauer, beautiful interior. Got okay gas mileage for what it was, of course. Fast as hell. Car had 300 horsepower from the factory out of an SUV. It was dangerously fast. I mean, you put your foot down, you were gone in that thing. That's probably the fastest car off the line that I've ever owned. I mean, easily. Pain to work on, but that's another story. 3-valve 4.6. Ooh, cam phasers. That car was dead reliable. Never gave me any issues. I loved that thing. I drove that thing to Tennessee. It didn't skip a beat. It was awesome. It could haul stuff. It had a 3rd row. It could seat 7 people. It was super easy to drive. Had a real short wheelbase, and it was super easy to park and to turn around and to drive. I could parallel park that thing easier than the Monte Carlo. Easier than the Fusion, probably, honestly. The only complaints about that one I really had are, and I should mention again, my Fusion, if you don't know, is a Virginia car. It has no rust. My Explorer is one of 2 vehicles I've ever owned that is a Michigan car. Well, started in Wisconsin, but a Michigan car its life. So it was rusty. The frame on it was intact, but the rocker panels, not so much. You open the door and you can see down under there. Frame was intact, and that's about all that mattered. But the few negatives about that car, kind of hard. The 4-wheel drive was a little bit clunky. I never really used it, but every time I did it, you could just tell it was not really meant to be used as a heavy 4x4. You could just tell. Negatives about that car. I really don't have that many. My only main one, honestly, is that it drove like a pickup truck, which is to be expected because it's a Ford Explorer that's body on frame, but it did not drive like a car, and you knew instantly like that you were not driving a car when you drove it. You were driving a truck with a cab on the back. Phenomenal vehicle, though. I would buy that one so fast back in a heartbeat. In fact, I wish I could have kept it. Oh, that thing was wonderful. That thing was absolutely phenomenal vehicle. I hauled so much stuff in that. I mean, that thing was... I think I've actually hauled more in that than I ever hauled in my pickup truck, believe it or not, in the little time I had that thing. Because the thing with that is I could load it up to the ceiling. My pickup truck is a bed, so whatever the tonneau cover can fit, stuff like that. And if you folded all the seats in that Explorer down, from the front seat to the back of the car, you actually did get 6.5 feet. So, well, that's not true. I think you got about 6. So you got a Ranger size, basically, which was fine for most people. So, but great car. I really have nothing bad to say about it. Other than that, it drove like a truck. It was great. I loved that thing, and I still miss it. And of course, number one, no surprise, the 2004 Ford Freestar Limited. I might be the only person on earth whose favorite car they've ever owned was a Ford Freestar. This is the actual car key that I used with it. But essentially, that car was phenomenal. Got good gas mileage. It drove like my Fusion. If you were driving it and you had your eyes closed, you would not think you're in a minivan. It drove like a sedan. It had phenomenal cargo capacity. I mean, you took the seats out of that thing, easily the best hauling vehicle I've ever owned. Oh my God, it was good. Engine, 4.2 V6, powerful. Not crazy, but for a minivan, it would get up and go. It definitely would. Transmission, all right, not perfect. Mine was a limited, so it had all the fancy shit, all the buttons and the power doors and fancy shit. It drove amazingly, that thing did. That's probably one of the best driving cars I've ever had, honestly. That thing would just, you could go on the highway, just pile the miles on that thing. Had some issues, alignment wasn't straight, had a couple warning lights on, cruise control on it didn't work. It was kind of a pain to work on because of the way the engine bay was set up, but... And really, the one thing about that one that makes me draw to it more than the Explorer, the one thing was slightly better fuel economy and more space. And the fact that it drove like a car. Less features, of course, because you're looking at a 2004 versus a 2010, but yeah. I don't understand the hate for those vans. They're not great vans. I mean, we'll be honest, they're not, but mine was, I couldn't have asked for anything better. The only thing that eventually did it in was the rot. I mean, that was the other Michigan car I owned, and being unibody, 20 years, phew, God, that thing was destroyed. The frame on that thing, the subframe was so rotted out. It was such a shame. I would have kept driving that thing. Absolutely. If I could have fixed the rust, I would have never bought that Fusion. That's the only reason that Fusion is here, is because that van unfortunately succumbed to the rust. And I ended up selling it to someone who is a royal piece of shit scum on society, but that's another story for another time of what happened to that van. But yeah, that Freestar, man, I can't think of anything bad to say about it. Other than the rust, and that's not the fault of the car. That's just Michigan. I mean, in terms of Freestars, I mean, if I had to think of one thing I didn't like, I mean, the seats weren't that comfortable, even though they were leather. They were real hard, like 2000s leather. They weren't like 90s leather or 80s leather where it's super pillowy. They were hard leather. But, man, that thing was just freaking great. That's all I can say about it, is it was freaking great. It was an amazing vehicle. I really don't have anything bad to say about it. I love that thing. I am still sad that I had to get rid of it because I love that damn thing, but I just couldn't do it with all the rust. I couldn't. It was too much. But yeah, so that would in fact be the number one car that if I could get any of my cars back, I guess excluding the two I have now, that Freestar would be it, and the Explorer would be number two. That's going to conclude the ranking of the vehicles. Might have surprised some of you, but some of you maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you guys learned something new about me, that I like minivans. No, I actually did. I looked for a Freestar when I bought that. I didn't just buy a Freestar because it was cheap. Just like when I bought my Fusion, I was looking for a Fusion or a Taurus of similar specs, even though I really wanted a 4-cylinder and I was willing to look at a V6 Taurus. I just knew I didn't want to Focus because I needed something that could, comfortably haul people in the back seat. And I would have preferred, honestly, a Focus for the room, but I needed something with a bigger back seat. Focuses, they're tiny. So that's why I didn't look at a Focus. I looked for a Fusion because it's still got that 4-cylinder, but just a little bit longer. So I got a little more room, drive a little nicer, a little more safe. So yeah, but those are my 6 cars and the rankings I put them at. So thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe and click like if you like what you see, and follow me on the web at isaac24.com. And that is it. Bye-bye.